let's look at the chart first, right? So for Nvidia, you look at there's a small pump here, right? From about 175 to about 183. That was because of the announcement, right? Nvidia will invest in OpenAI, right? So I also curious, like, wow, such a big pump. Why the market look at it so positively, right? But I think one good thing is that we all know that OpenAI is considered the number one in terms of first to market, and then number two is in terms of scale, in terms of market share in generative AI, right? They're still the number one. So now Nvidia have a stake into the companies, right? I think definitely that can be seen as positive, but there's also all sort of negative things which we will talk about, which is the round tripping, the circular revenue stuff, right? We'll go into those. But I think after that, right, it kind of cooled down in the couple of few days after that. So right now it was traded as $177. But if you just zoom up, I think this year returns still quite decent, close to 29%. Of course, not the best one. Definitely way below companies like Palantir and Alibaba, right? So yeah, but still a decent returns if we zoom out. So I think this is the infinite money glitch, right? Kind of like a revenue circling around. So I think this is like a memes, right? People saw this, they just post in the social media. I also share this. I find it quite interesting and quite funny. People frame it like there's $100 billion coming from Nvidia and they invest in OpenAI. Then OpenAI spend $100 billion to Oracle to build the data center. Then after that, Oracle also spent that $100 billion back to Nvidia to buy the chip from Nvidia, right? So the money kind of like just circulating around these three companies here. But I think this is, although it's a quite funny memes, but there's a lot of inaccuracy in this picture here, which we'll go into the details and just to tell you what is the announcement. And then this is also another one which is quite funny, like $100 billion flow around, right? Then the best, those who are like, they don't trust all these things, they keep saying that AI is a bubble. As you look at all these things keep circulating and revenue keep going up, right? So they are like not having a good day. So this is also quite a funny one. Okay, let's look at the deal structure, okay? Because we need to get the facts right. First one is that based on the announcement, right, there will be 10 gigawatts of infrastructure developments. So OpenAI will build and deploy at least 10 gigawatts of AI data center capacity using Nvidia systems. So definitely in terms of scale, this is big. We are talking about millions of GPUs. So the overall goal, right, is to support OpenAI pursuit of ever more powerful AI. So I think explicitly they are targeting the path to super intelligence in the announcement. So this is one. And then second thing is that Nvidia 100 billion investment commitments. So to enable this build up, right, Nvidia has signed a letter of intent. Okay, just a letter of intent doesn't mean that money is already invested, right? So this is just like they are being public in terms of what they plan to do here, right, in this deal. So they will invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI in tranches progressively as each gigawatts of capacity is deployed. So think of it this way, right? So 100 billion is for 10 gigawatts. So when the first gigawatts is being deployed, right, they will invest $10 billion. This one will probably take 5 to 6 years just to complete. And the first gigawatt will be second half of 2026. I think that's basically the agreement. This structure, right, aligns Nvidia capital outlays with OpenAI actual executions of the infrastructure project, reducing upfront risk. So what it means is that it is not like 100 billion is being handed over, right? If you look at the timings, it will be like 10 billion from Nvidia going to OpenAI. Then they also will deploy build all these data center, and some money will also flow back to Nvidia because they need to buy their chip, right? So and just FYI, this is not going through Oracle. This is actually Nvidia helping OpenAI build their own data centers. So I think this is one things that we need to clear out. So because if you remember initially, I think OpenAI, they have partnership with Microsoft, right? Then after that, the Stargate project came in. That's partnership with SoftBank and also Oracle. And then now this deal, right, is actually the deal of just helping OpenAI build their own data center. In terms of the control, these investments, right, will be in exchange for non-voting equity shares in OpenAI. Non-votings, right, meaning that although now Nvidia is the shareholders of OpenAI, they are not having a board seat, so they can't really influence OpenAI when it comes to their management. So I think there's also one reason why it is non-voting, because now Nvidia is becoming OpenAI shareholders, right? At the same time, right, they're selling all these chips to OpenAI. So imagine that if they have a voting right, and by having a voting right means that they have a control, right, then they need to consolidate OpenAI's financials into their income statement and balance sheets, right? And that will complicate things, because if you sell to someone else, right, you record that as a revenue. But if you sell to your own subsidiary, right, then you cannot record that as a revenue. There's no such thing as selling to yourself, right? So that's why by structuring it as no votings, right, I think it helps on the accounting side that they can still recognize all these revenues that's deriving from selling to OpenAI. So I think this is also quite interesting, as in like important to know. This is also also structured to avoid regulatory issues and consolidations in accountings, which I just mentioned. Then the next one, which I also mentioned, the 10 billions first tranche, right, will be end of 2026, and then they will be using the next generation platform, which is the Vera Rubins. So indicating that the hardware OpenAI gets will be state-of-the-art successors to the current leading GPU. The current one is Blackwell, and then I think end of this year we'll get the Blackwell Ultra, and then after that next year will be Vera Rubins. So if you look at the roadmap, right, they are getting the ones that's the middle parts, which is the Vera Rubins. And then by the way, this Vera Rubins, right, is a lot more powerful as compared to Blackwell. So just a recap, right, this is the Blackwell system, the one that's currently selling. And then when we talk about Rubins, that's the size of it. And you just look at the numbers, right, Rubins GPU, this is 576, right, current one is 72. So I think in terms of the capability of the systems, right, is completely different. So now I think all these new Endowus, right, but what they are working towards, right, is really those that's in the future, which is that 2026 Rubins. So this is quite interesting one. Then in terms of the purchase commitment, I think this is also very important because OpenAI, right, once they sign this deal, right, they commit to purchase Nvidia compute and networking system at massive scale as part of building these data centers. So the phrasing, right, deploy with Nvidia system representing millions of GPUs implies OpenAI will be buying essentially all the required GPUs and likely related accelerators interconnects from Nvidia. So now Nvidia is becomes their preferred strategic compute and networking partners going forward. If you read this, you don't think there's any difference, I just want to remind you that remember OpenAI, they also mentions that they are creating their own ASICs with the help of Broadcom, right? They are designing their own chips, their ASICs. Now I think by this announcement, right, I think all the efforts in terms of like designing their own chips, right, now those projects maybe they could like continue it, but it's just not a priority at least for the next few years until this project is completed. So I think this is very important because you know that Nvidia chips is quite expensive. So I think all this, like for example Meta also talking about designing their own chip, and then OpenAI also talking about designing their own chip, Microsoft also do the same, right? So imagine that if there's no such agreement, right, and suddenly let's say OpenAI really spend a lot of effort to design their own chip and then work with Broadcom, and they really become independent from Nvidia, right? So then it will become an issue for Nvidia. By just having this deal, right, we know that from Nvidia perspective, they are securing a lot of orders coming from OpenAI, right? So and it's also a testament that OpenAI still see Nvidia's chip as the top tier one because they need all this performance, right? They cannot say that, oh, I know that Nvidia chips is like not as good as compared to something else, and they still sign a deal with Nvidia, right? They won't do this kind of stupid things because doing this kind of things, they will lose out to their competitors, right? Because performance is very, very important. It actually just determines in terms of how much profit or how capable is their offerings, right? So I think this is a testament on both sides. So now at least we know that OpenAI is happy to stick with Nvidia. So it's definitely good for Nvidia. I think this is the purchase commitment. And then this one is more the roadmap core optimizations, right? The joint roadmap. I think this is also quite important because maybe for 2026 chips, maybe there won't be too much influence coming from OpenAI. But the upcoming few years, right, by having this partnership type integration between OpenAI and Nvidia, right, what it means is that they will influence each other. Say for example, OpenAI, they will know in terms of the models what kind of specs or what kind of like hardwares that they need in the future, right? And they will just openly discuss with Nvidia because they know that they are getting from Nvidia, right? So they will just tell them, okay, why not you do these kind of things, you optimize on certain directions, right? So then Nvidia also getting great insights and great inputs from OpenAI in terms of the directions, because remember all this hardware, right, you cannot just design your hardware without knowing how they will be used, right? You need to know in details in terms of the directions, and whatever OpenAI do, right, they will also shape the directions of this entire AI futures. So they will actually work together, and what happens, right, from this partnership is that now the software or the AIs that OpenAI come up with, right, in terms of the hardware coming from Nvidia, it will be like optimized, and then from Nvidia perspective is that whatever hardware that they come up with, right, it will be optimized for the software that will be running on OpenAI, right? So it's a win-win for both of them. If you don't get what I'm trying to say here, I think just look back on, let's say like back to Intel's era, right, where Intel coming up with the chip and then it runs on Windows, right? So whatever that Intel's coming up with, right, it will be like fully optimized to run on Windows, and then it is true for both sides. That's why they are all winning together, right? So I think of it this way, right? Let's say back during those days, if you are AMD, you come up with x86 6, right? Yes, your chip can be like quite performant, but whenever your chips trying to run on Windows, right, actually it's not the Windows or the software or the drivers, right? They are not optimized for AMD, but they are optimized for Intel. That's why the performance of AMD versus Intel is different. Intel just win because of this, right? Because of these tight integrations. This is also true for on the other sides, right? So I think all these integration is very important. It really resembles the partnerships between Intel and Windows back during those old days. So I think this is very important. It is a win-win for both of them. I think the worrying things is that will this cause some sort of like antitrust or not? I think that is yet to see. But so far, I think because they are all very transparent here, I think it's still fine for now. So I think that's the core optimization. Okay, I think I mentioned the deal structure. Let's quickly go through the round trip revenues that people talk about, right? Because I think I won't say there's like zero concerns coming from here. So I just tell you what is the concerns. Okay, so the round trip revenues, right, it is referring to the arrangement where money flows in circle between two parties, resulting in revenue recognition that might be considered artificial or misleading. Okay, so in terms of the definitions, right, so when we talk about round trip, right, it's really those revenues that is like lack economic substance. So just a classic round trip, right? Companies A gives companies B funds, so A gives B monies, and then B's, right, use those funds, right, to purchase goods or services from companies A. So that's why I give you money, you buy from me, and then I give you money, you buy from me. So it will keep going round and round and round, right? So you can see that they can just artificially boost up their revenues by just doing these kind of things, right? Because if I sell you something that you buy from the money I give to you, right, there's no limit, right? They can literally print revenue like crazy. But all these things, right, it happens around like in the 1990s. But now accounting, all those things is already quite like there's already accounting rules to prevent these kind of things. So let's say in the form of classic round tripping, right, it's really fraudulent, meaning that it is not legal to do these kind of things. But that's why when people look at Nvidia and OpenAI deals, right, they look at the money, it's like flowing around, like they're saying that this is round tripping, right, which I don't think it is a classic round tripping. It is not a round tripping. It's actually a legit investment, and then it's a legit purchase from OpenAI. So I don't think it's a classic round trip. But indeed, money still flowing from Nvidia to OpenAI, then flow back. So that one is still true. It's just that both sides, right, it is transactions that have some economic substance instead of like what is being framed here. So I think this part, right, is trying to say, okay, the intentions, right, is to deceptively inflate sales of growth, right? So that's why it is very problematic. So if you look at some examples, right, I think back in AOL WorldCom case, right, this was like more than 20 years ago, right? So AOL paid WorldCom for network capacity, and then WorldCom in turn paid AOL for online advertising. It's actually a pre-arranged swap, right? So what it means is that money really flowing around between these two companies, and then both companies, they are recording higher and higher revenues, but actually in terms of substance, there's no such substance. So all this in terms of accounting is really not allowed anymore. Then now come back to OpenAI versus Nvidia, right? Why I'm saying that this is not a classic round tripping is because if you ask Nvidia, you need to stand from Nvidia perspective and think, does the investment into OpenAI, right, is a investment that makes sense? Like let's say if you are not Nvidia, you are just outside investor, like let's say you or me, right? Do you want to invest in OpenAI? Because if yes, right, without all this arrangement about purchase commitment from OpenAI, right, if you think that OpenAI is a good investment, right, then it makes sense for Nvidia to invest. Then the second question is that standing from OpenAI perspective, are you happy buying Nvidia chip, right? So and I think the answer is clearly yes, because right now, although maybe now they don't operate their own data centers, it's all through Oracle or through Microsoft, right? But we all know that all these companies, they are buying Nvidia products, right? So meaning their products is really a great product, right? So it also makes sense for OpenAI to buy from them. So two different transactions, they both make sense by looking at it on a standalone basis. That's why it is not deceptive, right? So just want to make that clear. So I just want to get into more details in terms of like whether OpenAI, like investment into OpenAI is a good idea, right? Because say for example, from Nvidia perspective, if now they invest in OpenAI, although money also flow back, right? But let's say this investment into OpenAI turn out to be a shit investment, right? Say for example, OpenAI really lose out to other AI companies, right? They might be losing out to, let's say like Meta AI, or to Grok, to Anthropic, right? Then this entire OpenAI investment go into shit. Then it is bad for Nvidia, right? Because now instead of taking that revenue and buy back their own shares, they go and invest in OpenAI, can turn out to be a bad investment, right? So we need to look at that, like to decide whether OpenAI investment is a good one. That's what we are getting into some details here, right? So the question that I want to ask myself myself is that is OpenAI a clear winner? Because it seems that Nvidia is really like picking winner. Why they take the money and invest in OpenAI? Why not other companies? Why not Grok, for example, right? Why not Meta AI, right? That's something that I want to get into more details. So for those who haven't really tracked the statistics, right? Right now, ChatGPT, right, in terms of their weekly active users, right, it is 782 millions. Still less than 1 billion, but 782 millions is still big numbers. But I think part of it is coming from Microsoft Copilot. If you add up that numbers, it's 838 millions. Then in terms of their monthly user, you look at the numbers, right? If you recall, there's one point people say, oh, you look at the traffic to OpenAI, right now it's like going downhill, right? But if you look at all these numbers since June 2024 until now, right, their monthly users is really going up. It assures us that the numbers, the active user is increasing. I think this is very important because sometimes if you look at, let's say when Grok, they say they launched Grok 4, right? And then they compare in terms of their benchmark. I think some of this benchmark is even better as compared to ChatGPT, right? Which is true, right? But if you look at the user numbers, right, I think there's no doubt that ChatGPT is still number one. And by far, right, they're still number one. So if you look at their market share, it is currently about 75%. So out of 4 users, right, 3 users are, using ChatGPT. So by this alone, right, is like we can say that for now, because it's hard to predict the future, right? But at least as of now, right, ChatGPT is still the king. OpenAI is still the king in AI. They're number one. They have 75% of the market share, right? And to me, this is very important because when it comes to AI, there's this loop they will complete, right? Which is that they need to look at the user reaction, user engagement in order to use that information to make their product even better. I think this is very similar to how Google's making their search engine become better and better, right? Because they have all the traffic flow, and then based on the traffic flow, that informs them or they use that data to make their search even better. So I think it's very similar in AI space is that every day when you interact with ChatGPT, right, you are actually making ChatGPT better because they have all this data just from your reactions, right? They will take that and use the insights, right, to know whether their product works or not, okay? So that is a very important ingredient to make their product better. So that's why I would say that number one, they need to get the users first. Based on this chart, right, you can see that they are still able to maintain the market shares, right? I think this is very important. Other AI, I won't say that they don't have a share. Let's say even 20 plus percent, right? In terms of absolute numbers, still going up because there's more and more people using AI, right? In terms of the market share, I think they are still able to maintain that, right? Which is very important here. So who's the others that is like all the, in terms of other market shares, right? Perplexity, Gemini, and then the other ones is talking about, I think that here we can see that Grok also have 2%, DeepSeek also 4%. This is coming from different sources, but overall you can see that the huge market shares, right, is still coming from ChatGPT, 76%, right? So I think that alone, right, give us some assurance that they are still the king. If you ask me whether I want to invest in OpenAI, my answer is clearly a yes. I won't invest big number because we all know that this kind of investment, we also don't know in terms of valuations, what kind of valuation that they're investing in, right? I think this is also not disclosed. All these details is hard to say, but I trust that when Jensen make this decision, right, I trust that he's looking at the valuation and it makes sense for him. So I think that's something that gives us some assurance that they are not throwing money into the sea and just hope that, oh, the money will flow back. Trust on the judgment. That's something I want to cover. Okay, this is the light slide already. So let's say if you, after listening to my sharing here, you still have some doubt, right? I think this is definitely the best video that I have watched on all these topics because I think this topic, Jensen also explained that he's happy investing in OpenAI, right? So I think you can see that he understood, like, in terms of like who is winning in AI space, and he really happy to have a stake, right? I think that's something that you can listen from him directly. And then second thing, right, I also, when I invest in Nvidia, right, I also keep thinking, okay, right now they are still on the ramp up space in terms of building all these data center, right? That's why we have seen that in terms of Nvidia growth, right, they are still growing nicely, right? But these things, I know it is not going to continue for, like 15 years, right? I think it's more like they just need to like grow in the first few years, right? And then all these data center, they will move from the classic computing to accelerated computing, right? So these things, it can run for another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I don't know. After that, right, it will be just maintenance onwards, right? Maintenance meaning that you won't see the growth to be in the range of, let's say, like 30 or 50% kind of growth rate, right? It will slow down at one point, right? Then once that slow down, right, most of the data center is already accelerated computing, right? Then who is actually deriving all these revenues, right? I think most like the companies that is like earning making tons of money from AI, right? I don't think it will be like Nvidia, like hardware companies. It will actually be software, right? It will actually be companies like OpenAI, Grok, Meta AI, and so on, right? Because think of it this way, right? Let's say if you look at the biggest companies that wins in terms of the classic computing, right? Not the accelerated computing, like the pre-AI world, right? These are companies, say for example, like Google, Meta. So these are companies that's actually like software. They have apps, right? They're running apps. They are providing software, and they are the one that's actually winning, not the hardware companies, not the Intel, right? So that's why I think when it comes to this, right, I would say that OpenAI, I really believe Gerstner when he said that OpenAI will be $1 trillion companies just because of the types of offering that they will come out from now and over the next 10 years. That's why now through Nvidia, I'm also an investor in OpenAI, right? I'm perfectly happy, right? So that's why I think this is a move that make complete sense, and I'm not that worried in terms of all this round tripping and stuff, right? So to me, it's like fun to look at all these memes, but actually, if you understand the deal, you would think that actually this is really a win-win for Nvidia and also for OpenAI.
Really brings us to, kind of the seminal moment this week that everybody's talking about, the massive deal you announced a couple of days ago with OpenAI Stargate, where you're going to be a preferred partner, invest $100 billion in the company over a period of time. They're going to build 10 gigs. And if they used Nvidia for those 10 gigs, that could be upwards of $400 billion in revenue to Nvidia. So help us understand, just tell us a little bit about that partnership, what it means to you, right? And why that investment makes so much sense for Nvidia.
So first of all, I'll answer that last question first.
Okay,
and then I'll come back and present my way through. I think that OpenAI is likely going to be the next multi-trillion-dollar hyperscale company.
Okay.
I think you and I.
Why do you call it a hyperscale company?
Hyperscale, like Meta's a hyperscale.
Yeah.
Google's a hyperscale.
Yeah.
They're going to have consumer and enterprise services, and they are very likely going to be the world's next multi-trillion-dollar hyperscale company.
Yes.
And I think you would agree with that.
I agree.
If that's the case, the opportunity to invest before they get there, this is some of the smartest investments we can possibly imagine. And you got to invest in things you know.
Right.
And it turns out we happen to know the space. Mm-hmm. And so the opportunity to invest in that, the return on that money is going to be fantastic. So we love the opportunity to invest. We don't have to invest.
Right.
And it's not required for us to invest, but they're giving us the opportunity to invest. Fantastic thing. Now let me start from the beginning. So we're partnering with OpenAI in several projects. The first project is the build out of Microsoft Azure. We're going to continue to do that. And that partnership is going fantastically. We have several years of build out to do, hundreds of billions of dollars of work just to do there.
Right.
The second is the OCI build out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some 5, 6, 7 gigawatts that are about to be built out. And so we're working with OCI and OpenAI and SoftBank to build that out.
Right.
Those projects are contracted. We're working on it. Lots of work to do. And then the third is CoreWeave, right? And so all of CoreWeave 4, I'm talking about OpenAI still.
Yes.
Okay. Everything in the context of OpenAI. And so the question is, what is this new partnership? This new partnership is about helping OpenAI, partnering with OpenAI to build their own self-build AI infrastructure for the first time.
Right.
And so this is us working directly with OpenAI at the chip level, at the software level, at the systems level, at the AI factory level, to help them become a fully operated hyperscale company. This is going to go on for some time. It's going to supplement the amount of, they're going through 2 exponentials, as you know.
Right.
The first exponential is the number of customers is growing exponentially. Right. And the reason for that is the AI is getting better, the use case is getting better, just about every application is connected to OpenAI now. And so they're going through the usage exponential. The second exponential is the computational exponential of every use.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Instead of just a one-shot inference, is now thinking before it answers. Yes. And so these 2 exponentials compounding the compute requirements. And so we got to build out all these different projects. And so this last one is an additive on top of everything that they've already announced, all the things that we're already working on with them. It's additive on top of that. And it's going to support this incredible exponential